Marcus Thompson was a man who had built his life around hard work, determination, and an unshakable belief in fairness. He wasn't just any businessman, he was the founder and owner of Thompson's Essentials, a retail chain that had grown from a single store into a nationwide success story. Marcus took pride in his company, not only because it provided jobs for thousands of people, but also because it stood as proof that anyone could achieve greatness if they worked hard enough. On this particular afternoon, Marcus decided to step away from his usual routine of board meetings and strategy sessions. For once, he wanted to experience his stores the way a regular customer would. So, dressed casually in a pair of faded jeans, sneakers, and a hoodie, he headed to one of his suburban locations, a sleek, modern building nestled inside a busy shopping mall. It was a branch he hadn't visited in months, and he figured it would be nice to see how things were running without announcing his arrival. As soon as Marcus walked through the automatic doors, he felt the familiar buzz of activity. The store smelled like freshly stocked shelves and polished floors, and soft music played overhead. Customers moved about, grabbing items off the racks or chatting with friends while browsing. Marcus grabbed a shopping basket and started wandering down the aisles, picking up snacks, toiletries, and a few household essentials. To anyone watching, he looked like just another shopper enjoying a lazy afternoon. But unbeknownst to Marcus, someone was paying very close attention to him. Lisa Harper, the store manager, stood near the checkout counters, her eyes narrowing slightly as she observed the tall, casually dressed man moving through the store. At first glance, there was nothing unusual about him. He wasn't causing trouble, and he certainly wasn't doing anything wrong. But something about him made Lisa uneasy. Maybe it was the way his hoodie covered most of his face, or maybe it was the fact that he seemed so relaxed, almost too comfortable for her liking. Lisa had been managing this location for over 3 years, and during that time she had developed a reputation for being strict when it came to maintaining order. She prided herself on keeping the store pristine and ensuring that everything ran smoothly. And while she might have considered herself fair-minded deep down, Lisa harbored certain biases she wasn't even fully aware of. These unconscious prejudices often shaped her interactions with others, especially those who didn't fit her idea of what a typical customer should look like. As Marcus continued his casual stroll through the store, Lisa began to follow him at a distance. She told herself she was just being cautious, keeping an eye on things to make sure everything was okay. But the truth was, her actions were driven by something more insidious. Every time Marcus picked up an item and placed it in his basket, Lisa's suspicion grew. Why was he taking so long? Why did he keep looking at his phone instead of focusing on his shopping? Was he planning something? Her mind raced with assumptions, each one more unfounded than the last. Before long, Lisa convinced herself that Marcus was up to no good. She imagined scenarios where he might try to slip unpaid merchandise into his bag or distract employees while someone else stole something nearby. Her heart began to race and she gripped the walkie-talkie clipped to her belt tightly. This couldn't wait. She needed to act now. Summoning her courage, Lisa approached Marcus cautiously. When she finally spoke, her voice was firm but laced with tension. "Excuse me, sir," she said, stepping directly into his path. Marcus paused, surprised by the sudden interruption. "Yes?" he replied politely, turning to face her. "Can I see your receipt for those items?" Lisa asked, gesturing toward the basket in his hand. Marcus blinked, confused by the request. "I haven't checked out yet," he explained calmly. "I'm still shopping." For a moment, Lisa hesitated. His answer made sense, but her doubts remained. Instead of backing off, she doubled down. "Well, you've been here for quite a while," she said, her tone sharpening. "Are you sure you're not forgetting something?" Marcus frowned, sensing that something wasn't right. "Ma'am, I'm just here to shop," he said, trying to remain patient. "There's no need for all this." He attempted to brush past her, but Lisa blocked his way again. By now, other shoppers had begun to notice the commotion. Some slowed down to watch, curious about what was happening, while others pretended not to pay attention. Feeling increasingly cornered, Marcus pulled out his phone to send a quick text to a friend, hoping to distract himself from the absurd situation. Unfortunately, Lisa misinterpreted this simple action as defiance. In her mind, Marcus was deliberately ignoring her requests, which only fueled her growing anger. Without thinking twice, she stepped aside and called mall security, claiming there was a suspicious individual in the store who refused to cooperate. Within minutes, 2 uniformed security guards appeared, their presence immediately drawing stares from everyone around them. They marched straight up to Marcus, flanking him on either side. "Is there a problem here?" one of them asked gruffly, addressing Lisa first. Lisa nodded emphatically, pointing directly at Marcus. "This man is acting strangely," she declared. "He won't show me a receipt and he's refusing to leave." Marcus sighed, exasperated by the ridiculousness of the situation. "Listen," he said, raising his hand slightly to show he meant no harm. "I'm a customer. I'm literally here to buy stuff. There's no reason for this." But Lisa wasn't having it. Her confidence bolstered by the security guard's arrival, she pressed forward, demanding that Marcus explain himself further. That's when things escalated even further. In a move that shocked everyone, including Marcus, Lisa reached for her phone and dialed 911. As she whispered into the receiver, describing the supposed threat posed by the suspicious black man in her store, Marcus realized that this incident was spiraling far beyond anything he could have imagined. Standing there, surrounded by strangers and authority figures, Marcus felt a mix of emotions: frustration, disbelief, and a deep sadness that such a trivial misunderstanding had turned into something so serious. But despite the chaos swirling around him, Marcus remained calm. He knew that the truth was on his side, and soon everyone else would know it too. As the tension in the store grew thicker, Marcus found himself at the center of a scene that felt surreal. The security guards stood close, their expressions stern, while Lisa hovered nearby, her arms crossed tightly over her chest, as if she were trying to appear authoritative. Shoppers who had been casually browsing moments earlier now lingered curiously, some pretending to examine products on nearby shelves while stealing glances at the unfolding drama. Whispers rippled through the crowd, and Marcus could feel the weight of dozens of eyes on him. One of the security guards, a tall man with a clipboard in hand, addressed Marcus again. "Sir, we need you to come with us," he said firmly but not unkindly. His partner, a shorter woman with sharp features, nodded in agreement, her hand resting lightly on the radio attached to her belt. Marcus raised an eyebrow, his patience wearing thin. "Come with you where?" he asked. "I haven't done anything wrong." Lisa stepped forward, her voice cutting through the air like a knife. "He's refusing to cooperate," she announced, loudly, as though she were speaking directly to the audience of onlookers rather than the people standing right in front of her. "We've asked him multiple times to show us his receipt and he keeps ignoring us." Marcus turned to face her, his frustration bubbling just beneath the surface. "Ma'am, I told you, I'm still shopping. I haven't even gone to the register yet. How can I give you a receipt for something I haven't paid for?" His tone was calm, but there was a steely edge to it now, a hint of authority that made Lisa pause for a fraction of a second before she recovered. "That's not good enough," she snapped back. "You've been wandering around this store for too long, acting suspicious. We have every right to ask questions." The accusation stung, not because it was true, but because it was so blatantly false. Marcus hadn't been wandering or acting suspicious. He had simply been doing what millions of people did every day, shopping. Yet here he was, being treated like a criminal because of assumptions based entirely on how he looked. For a brief moment, Marcus considered walking away, leaving the basket behind and heading straight for his car. But something held him back. This wasn't just about him anymore. It was about principle. If he let this slide, what message would that send? That it was okay for people to be judged unfairly? That racism disguised as caution should go unchecked? Instead of retreating, Marcus planted his feet firmly on the ground and met Lisa's gaze head-on. "Let me get one thing clear," he said, his voice steady and commanding. "I'm not going anywhere until you explain why you think I'm suspicious. Is it because I'm black? Because if that's the case, you're making a huge mistake." Lisa recoiled slightly, clearly unprepared for such a direct confrontation. Her lips parted as if she wanted to respond, but no words came out. Instead, she glanced nervously at the security guards, seeking backup. They shifted uncomfortably, sensing that the situation was escalating beyond their control. Just then, the sound of sirens pierced the air, growing louder with each passing second. Everyone froze, including Marcus. A few seconds later, 2 police officers entered the store, their uniforms crisp and their expressions serious. The sight of them sent a ripple of unease through the crowd, and several shoppers discreetly moved toward the exits, eager to avoid any further involvement. One of the officers, a middle-aged man with graying hair, approached the group. "What's going on here?" he asked, his voice neutral but firm. Before Marcus could speak, Lisa jumped in, her words tumbling out in a rush. "Officer, thank goodness you're here," she began, her tone dripping with relief. "This man has been behaving erratically. He refuses to show us a receipt, and when we tried to question him, he became hostile." Hostile? Marcus almost laughed at the absurdity of the word. He hadn't raised his voice, touched anyone, or done anything remotely aggressive. And yet, here he was, being painted as some kind of threat. The second officer, a younger woman with keen eyes, glanced at Marcus, then at Lisa, clearly trying to assess the situation. "Is that true, sir?" she asked, addressing Marcus directly. Before he could answer, Lisa interjected once more. "He won't cooperate," she insisted. "He's been ignoring all our requests." Marcus took a deep breath, determined to remain composed despite the mounting frustration. "Officer, let me clarify something," he said, turning his full attention to the 2 officers. "I'm a customer in this store. I've been shopping peacefully for the past 20 minutes. This woman," he gestured toward Lisa, "has been following me, accusing me of things I haven't done. She called you here based on nothing more than her own assumptions." The officers exchanged a glance, their expressions unreadable. It was clear they weren't sure who to believe. Lisa, sensing their hesitation, leaned in closer. "Look, I know what I saw," she said, her voice rising slightly. "He's been acting strangely since he walked in. Something isn't right." At this point, Marcus realized that words alone wouldn't be enough to convince them. He needed proof, not just for the officers, but for everyone watching. Reaching into his pocket, he pulled out his wallet and flipped it open to reveal his ID badge. The gold emblem of Thompson's Essentials gleamed under the fluorescent lights, and his name and title, CEO, were printed clearly beneath it. "This is who I am," Marcus said, holding the badge out for the officers to see. "I own this store. In fact, I own all of them. I came here today to shop, not to cause trouble, but apparently my skin color is enough to make someone think I don't belong." The room fell silent. Absolute silence. The officers stared at the badge, then at Marcus, then at Lisa, whose face had gone pale. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water, but no sound came out. The security guards exchanged awkward glances, suddenly aware that they might have backed the wrong person. As for the shoppers, many of whom had been quietly observing the scene, murmurs of disbelief began to spread. I didn't know," Lisa stammered finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "You didn't say anything." Marcus cut her off, his voice firm but controlled. "That's because I shouldn't have to. Nobody should have to prove their worth or justify their presence in a public space. What you did today, calling the police on me without cause, is unacceptable. It's discriminatory, and it's something that needs to be addressed." The officers, visibly embarrassed by the turn of events, apologized profusely to Marcus. "We're very sorry, Mr. Thompson," the older officer said, tipping his hat respectfully. "We'll wrap this up immediately." With that, they turned and left the store, leaving behind a stunned group of employees and customers. But Marcus wasn't finished. He turned back to Lisa, who was now trembling slightly, her earlier bravado completely evaporated. "Do you understand what you've done?" he asked, his voice carrying a mix of anger and disappointment. "You judge me based on stereotypes, not facts. You caused a scene, humiliated me in front of these people, and wasted everyone's time. including mine. Do you realize how damaging that kind of behavior is? Lisa nodded weakly, tears welling up in her eyes. I'm sorry, she whispered. I didn't mean to. Marcus held up a hand, cutting her off again. Sorry isn't enough, he said. Actions have consequences, and this isn't something I'm going to forget anytime soon. With that, Marcus gathered his belongings and headed toward the exit, leaving Lisa standing in the middle of the store, surrounded by whispers and stares. The incident had shaken everyone involved, but for Marcus it was far from over. This wasn't just about him. It was about sending a message that prejudice, no matter how subtle, would not be tolerated. And as he stepped out into the cool evening air, Marcus knew exactly what he needed to do next. The air outside the store was thick with tension, even though Marcus had finally stepped away from the chaos inside. He stood near the entrance of the mall, taking slow, deliberate breaths as he processed everything that had just happened. The confrontation with Lisa, the arrival of the police, the stunned faces of the shoppers, it all felt like a whirlwind that refused to settle. Marcus clenched his fists briefly, then forced himself to relax. He knew anger wouldn't solve anything, but it was hard not to feel frustrated. After all, this wasn't the first time he'd faced discrimination because of his race, but it was one of the most blatant and public instances yet. As he leaned against a railing, Marcus replayed the events in his mind. He thought about how Lisa's assumptions had spiraled out of control so quickly, escalating from suspicion to accusations and ultimately involving law enforcement. It was infuriating, yes, but it was also eye-opening. This wasn't just about him. It was a reflection of a much larger issue, one that affected countless people every single day. For many, being racially profiled wasn't an isolated incident. It was a constant reality. And while Marcus had the privilege of revealing his identity as the CEO of the company, others didn't have that luxury. They couldn't simply pull out a badge or make a phone call to resolve the situation. That realization weighed heavily on Marcus's shoulders. After a few minutes of collecting his thoughts, Marcus decided it was time to take action. He pulled out his phone and dialed his assistant, Sarah, who answered almost immediately. Hey, Marcus, she said cheerfully. What's up? Sarah, I need you to do something for me, Marcus replied, his tone serious. I want you to get in touch with corporate headquarters and arrange an emergency meeting with the executive team. We need to address what happened today, and fast. Sarah's voice shifted from cheerful to concerned. Is everything okay? Did something happen? Marcus sighed. Let's just say I had an interesting experience at one of our stores. I'll explain everything when we meet, but trust me, this is urgent. Also, send someone to collect surveillance footage from the location where I am right now. Every angle, every detail, we're going to need it. Got it, Sarah said firmly. I'll handle it right away. With that settled, Marcus hung up and took another deep breath. He glanced back toward the store, where a few curious shoppers were still lingering near the windows, trying to catch a glimpse of what was happening inside. Lisa, meanwhile, had disappeared from view, likely retreating to her office to process the fallout of her actions. Marcus knew this wasn't the end of the story, not by a long shot. Back at corporate headquarters, news of the incident spread rapidly. By the time Marcus arrived for the emergency meeting later that evening, the entire executive team was gathered in the boardroom, their expressions ranging from concern to outright disbelief. Marcus walked in carrying a folder filled with documents and photos, including screenshots of social media posts that had already begun circulating online. Videos taken by bystanders during the confrontation were starting to go viral, sparking heated discussions across various platforms. Marcus placed the folder on the table and looked around at his colleagues. Thank you all for coming on such short notice, he began. I know this is unusual, but what happened today requires immediate attention. Let me start by explaining exactly what went down. For the next 20 minutes, Marcus recounted the events step by step, leaving no detail unspoken. He described how Lisa had singled him out based purely on appearance, how her suspicions had escalated into a full-blown accusation, and how the involvement of security and police had turned a simple shopping trip into a humiliating ordeal. As he spoke, the room grew quieter and quieter, the weight of his words sinking in. When Marcus finished, there was a moment of silence before James, the head of operations, broke it. "This is unacceptable," he said, shaking his head. "We pride ourselves on creating inclusive environments for both our employees and our customers. What happened today goes against everything we stand for." Others nodded in agreement, their faces grim. Emily, the chief legal officer, spoke next. "From a legal standpoint, we need to act swiftly. Not only does this reflect poorly on us as a company, but it could also open us up to potential lawsuits if not handled properly." Marcus nodded. "That's why I called this meeting. We can't let this slide. Lisa's behavior was discriminatory, plain and simple. She judged me solely based on my skin color, and that's something we cannot tolerate, especially within our own organization." The team spent the next hour discussing possible courses of action. They reviewed the surveillance footage, which clearly showed Lisa following Marcus through the store and confronting him without provocation. Witness statements from employees and shoppers further corroborated Marcus's account of the events. By the end of the discussion, the decision was unanimous. Lisa would be terminated effective immediately. Additionally, the company would issue a formal apology to Marcus, not just as the CEO, but as a customer who had been treated unfairly. But Marcus wasn't satisfied with stopping there. "Firing Lisa is necessary, but it's not enough," he said, leaning forward in his chair. "This isn't just about one person making a mistake. This is about systemic issues that allow prejudice to thrive unchecked. If we don't address them, this will happen again, either here or at another location." His words resonated deeply with the group. Together, they brainstormed ways to prevent similar incidents in the future. One idea was to implement mandatory diversity training for all employees, focusing specifically on recognizing and combating implicit bias. Another proposal involved revising the protocols for handling suspected shoplifting, ensuring that accusations were based on concrete evidence rather than subjective judgment. Finally, they agreed to launch a public campaign promoting inclusivity and equality, using Marcus's experience as a catalyst for change. By the time the meeting concluded, the executive team had a clear plan of action. Marcus left the boardroom, feeling a mix of emotions, relief that steps were being taken, but also a lingering sadness over the fact that such measures were even necessary. Still, he reminded himself that progress often came from difficult moments. This incident, painful as it was, could serve as a turning point, not just for Thompson's Essentials but for the broader conversation about racial profiling in retail spaces. Meanwhile, outside the corporate walls, the story continued to gain traction. News outlets picked up on the viral videos, and soon headlines about the CEO mistaken for a shoplifter dominated social media feeds. Some praised Marcus for addressing the issue head-on, calling him a role model for leadership and accountability. Others criticized Lisa's actions, labeling her as prejudiced and incompetent. Opinions varied widely, but one thing was certain. The incident had sparked a nationwide dialogue about racism and discrimination in everyday settings. For Marcus, the attention was overwhelming, but also validating. He knew that sharing his story could help shed light on a pervasive problem, encouraging others to speak out against injustice when they encountered it. But he also understood that real change wouldn't come overnight. It would require ongoing effort, education, and a commitment to doing better, not just as individuals, but as a society. As he drove home that night, Marcus reflected on the day's events. He thought about Lisa, whose life had likely been changed forever by her poor judgment. He thought about the employees who had witnessed the confrontation and might now see their workplace differently, and he thought about the countless people who silently endured similar experiences every day, hoping for a world where they wouldn't have to prove their worth based on the color of their skin. Despite the challenges ahead, Marcus felt a renewed sense of purpose. This wasn't just a personal victory, it was a call to action, and he was ready to answer it. The days following the incident were a whirlwind for Marcus Thompson. What had started as a routine shopping trip had exploded into a national conversation, with headlines about racial profiling and discrimination dominating news cycles. Social media was ablaze with reactions to the story, ranging from outrage over Lisa's actions to admiration for Marcus's composure and leadership in addressing the situation. The video footage of the confrontation, taken by bystanders and shared widely online, had gone viral, sparking debates across platforms about bias, accountability, and systemic racism in everyday life. At first, Marcus tried to shield himself from the noise. He avoided scrolling through social media comments or reading opinion pieces dissecting his experience, but it was impossible to ignore the sheer magnitude of the response. Friends, colleagues, and even strangers reached out to share their thoughts. Some thanked him for speaking out, while others shared their own stories of being racially profiled in stores, airports, and other public spaces. Each message reinforced how widespread the issue truly was, and how desperately change was needed. Despite the chaos, Marcus knew he couldn't step back. As the face of Thompson's Essentials, he had a responsibility to lead by example, and so he decided to embrace the moment, using his platform to drive meaningful action. The company issued a formal statement acknowledging the incident, apologizing for the treatment Marcus received, and outlining steps they planned to take to prevent similar occurrences in the future. The statement concluded with a powerful quote from Marcus himself. "Discrimination has no place in our stores or in our society. It's time we hold ourselves accountable and work together to create a world where everyone feels welcome." While the public response was largely supportive, not everyone agreed with Marcus's handling of the situation. Critics emerged, questioning whether firing Lisa was too harsh a punishment. Some argued that she had simply made a mistake, a poor judgment, call fueled by stress or miscommunication rather than outright prejudice. Others suggested that Marcus should have shown more leniency, perhaps offering her a second chance instead of terminating her employment outright. These criticisms weighed on Marcus, though he refused to let them derail his focus. He understood that people would always have differing opinions, especially when it came to sensitive issues like race and accountability. But he also knew that allowing discriminatory behavior to go unchecked sent a dangerous message, one that perpetuated harmful stereotypes and normalized exclusionary practices. In private conversations with trusted advisors, Marcus acknowledged the complexity of the situation. "It's not just about Lisa," he said. "It's about setting a precedent. If we don't draw a line here, what stops someone else from doing the same thing tomorrow?" To address these concerns publicly, Marcus agreed to sit down for an interview with a prominent news network. During the segment, the host asked pointed questions about the backlash, giving Marcus an opportunity to explain his perspective. "I don't believe anyone is born racist," he began, choosing his words carefully. "But biases exist, often without us realizing it. When those biases influence decisions, especially in positions of authority, they can cause real harm." Firing Lisa wasn't about punishing her personally. It was about sending a clear message that this kind of behavior won't be tolerated. "At the same time, I hope she uses this experience as a learning opportunity. We all make mistakes, but it's how we grow from them that matters." His thoughtful response resonated with viewers, many of whom praised him for striking a balance between accountability and empathy. Still, Marcus knew that words alone weren't enough. True progress required action, and he was determined to deliver. In addition to addressing the public discourse, Marcus turned his attention inward, focusing on implementing the changes discussed. During the emergency meeting with the executive team, first on the agenda was rolling out mandatory diversity training for all employees across the company. Designed in collaboration with experts in equity and inclusion, the program aimed to educate staff members about implicit bias, microaggressions, and the importance of treating every customer with dignity and respect. Role-playing exercises and interactive workshops were incorporated to help participants recognize and challenge their assumptions in real-world scenarios. Next, the company revised its protocols for handling suspected shoplifting. Previously, store managers and security personnel had been given broad discretion to approach customers they deemed suspicious. a policy that left room for subjective interpretations based on appearance or behavior. Under the new guidelines, employees were required to document specific evidence before taking any action, such as witnessing someone conceal merchandise or attempting to leave without paying. Additionally, supervisors were instructed to review all incidents involving law enforcement to ensure compliance with the updated standards. To further reinforce these changes, Thompson's Essentials launched a public awareness campaign titled "Everyone Belongs Here." Featuring testimonials from employees and customers alike, the initiative highlighted the company's commitment to fostering inclusive environments where diversity was celebrated rather than feared. Billboards, television ads, and social media posts carried the slogan alongside images of people from different backgrounds shopping, laughing, and connecting in Thompson's stores. The campaign quickly gained traction, earning praise from advocacy groups and consumers who appreciated the brand's proactive stance. As the weeks passed, the initial frenzy surrounding the incident began to subside. Life at corporate headquarters returned to its usual rhythm, though Marcus noticed subtle shifts in the atmosphere. Conversations around the office reflected a heightened awareness of inclusivity, with employees actively seeking ways to contribute to the company's mission. Store managers reported increased engagement from their teams, who embraced the new training programs with enthusiasm. Even customers seemed to notice the difference, leaving positive reviews about the welcoming vibe in Thompson's locations. Lisa Harper, however, the aftermath proved far more challenging. After her termination, she struggled to find new employment. Retail chains were hesitant to hire someone whose name had become synonymous with controversy, and interviews often ended abruptly once potential employers discovered her past. Friends distanced themselves, uncomfortable with the association, while former colleagues avoided discussing the incident altogether. Isolated and overwhelmed, Lisa found herself grappling with guilt and regret. Eventually, she reached out to Marcus, writing a heartfelt letter expressing remorse for her actions. In it, she admitted that her behavior had been driven by unconscious biases she hadn't fully recognized until now. She thanked him for holding her accountable and vowed to use the experience as a catalyst for personal growth. Reading the letter, Marcus felt a pang of sympathy. While he didn't condone what Lisa had done, he believed in the possibility of redemption. He responded with a brief note, encouraging her to seek resources on combating bias and continue working toward becoming a better version of herself. Though the storm had passed, its impact lingered. For Marcus, the incident served as both a reminder of the challenges facing marginalized communities and an affirmation of the power of resilience and leadership. By confronting the issue head-on, he had transformed a deeply personal experience into a catalyst for change, not just within his company but across the broader retail industry. And while there was still much work to be done, Marcus remained hopeful. Every step forward, no matter how small, brought the world closer to a future where everyone truly belonged. The ripple effects of the incident continued to spread far beyond the walls of Thompson's Essentials. What had started as a single confrontation in a suburban store had grown into a movement, a conversation that refused to fade away quietly. Marcus Thompson found himself at the center of this cultural shift, not because he sought the spotlight, but because his actions demanded attention. His decision to address the issue publicly and implement sweeping changes within his company set a new standard for corporate responsibility. It wasn't long before other businesses began taking notice. At first, the reaction from competitors was muted. Some executives dismissed the story as an isolated event, while others privately criticized Marcus for being too harsh on Lisa Harper. But as public opinion shifted, and customers started demanding greater accountability from the brands they supported, many companies realized they couldn't afford to ignore the growing call for change. Slowly but surely, other retail chains began announcing their own initiatives aimed at promoting inclusivity and combating discrimination. One major competitor introduced a zero-tolerance policy for racial profiling, complete with anonymous reporting systems for employees and customers to flag biased behavior. Another launched a partnership with civil rights organizations to develop educational materials for staff members. Even smaller, family-owned stores joined the effort, posting signs in their windows declaring their commitment to treating all patrons with respect. The message was clear. What happened to Marcus could have happened anywhere, and no one wanted to be the next headline. For Marcus, seeing these developments unfold was both gratifying and humbling. He knew that real progress required collective action, and he welcomed the opportunity to collaborate with others in the industry. In fact, he took it a step further by hosting a summit called Retail United, bringing together leaders from across the retail sector to discuss strategies for creating safer, more inclusive shopping experiences. The event drew widespread media coverage, with speakers sharing personal stories, research findings, and practical solutions for addressing bias in everyday interactions. But the journey wasn't without its challenges. As positive as the momentum seemed, resistance persisted. Some critics argued that the focus on racial profiling was misplaced, claiming it detracted from larger issues like economic inequality or crime prevention. Others accused Marcus of exploiting the incident for publicity, suggesting that his response was less about justice and more about polishing the company's image. These accusations stung, even though Marcus tried to brush them off. He knew that any time you stood up for something meaningful, there would always be voices trying to tear you down. Still, Marcus refused to let negativity overshadow the progress being made. Instead, he leaned into the support he received from allies who shared his vision. One of the most unexpected sources of encouragement came from a group of high school students in a nearby town. They had organized a project inspired by Marcus's story, creating posters and videos urging their peers to challenge stereotypes and stand up against discrimination. When Marcus learned about their efforts, he invited them to visit corporate headquarters, where he spent hours answering their questions and listening to their ideas. Their enthusiasm reminded him why he had chosen to speak out in the first place: to inspire others to believe in the power of change. Meanwhile, back at Thompson's Essentials, the changes implemented after the incident were beginning to take root. Employees reported feeling more empowered to speak up when they witnessed discriminatory behavior, knowing that management supported their concerns. Customer feedback improved significantly, with many shoppers praising the friendlier, more welcoming atmosphere in stores. Sales figures reflected this shift as well, with several locations experiencing record-breaking numbers during holiday seasons. Marcus attributed much of this success to the diversity training program, which had become a cornerstone of the company's culture. During one session, a veteran employee named Carla shared how the workshops had changed her perspective. "I used to think I didn't have biases because I treated everyone the same," she admitted. "But now I realize that treating everyone the same isn't enough if we're not addressing the underlying assumptions we bring into our interactions. This training helped me see things differently, and I'm grateful for it." Stories. Like Carla's, reinforced Marcus's belief that education was key to lasting transformation. To expand the program's reach, he partnered with local schools and community organizations to offer free workshops open to the public. The sessions quickly gained popularity, attracting participants from diverse backgrounds eager to learn and grow together. Teachers praised the initiative for fostering empathy among students, while parents expressed gratitude for providing tools to navigate difficult conversations at home. As the months passed, Marcus also noticed a deeper connection forming between the company and its customers. People weren't just buying products, they were investing in a mission. Social media posts tagged with "Everyone Belongs" here flooded platforms, showcasing heartwarming moments of kindness and inclusion in Thompson's stores. A young mother shared a photo of her daughter proudly holding a sign she had made for a school project about ending racism. An elderly couple posted a video of themselves dancing in the checkout line, celebrating the joy they felt shopping somewhere that truly valued them. Each story added another layer to the narrative Marcus had started, one built on hope, resilience, and unity. Yet, despite the overwhelmingly positive response, Marcus remained mindful of the work still ahead. He understood that systemic change didn't happen overnight. It required constant vigilance and adaptation. To ensure the company stayed on track, he established an advisory board composed of experts in equity, psychology, and sociology. Their role was to review policies, monitor progress, and provide guidance on emerging issues. Regular audits were conducted to assess compliance with the new standards, and employees were encouraged to participate in ongoing discussions about improving workplace culture. On a personal level, the experience had left an indelible mark on Marcus. While he had always been passionate about fairness and equality, the incident deepened his resolve to use his influence for good. He started mentoring young entrepreneurs from underrepresented communities, helping them navigate the challenges of building successful businesses. He also became a vocal advocate for policy reforms aimed at reducing racial disparities in areas like housing, education, and criminal justice. Though these battles were far more complex than anything he faced, in the retail world, Marcus approached them with the same determination and optimism. Looking back, Marcus often thought about how differently things might have turned out if he hadn't revealed his identity that day. Would Lisa have doubled down on her accusations? Would the police have arrested him? These questions haunted him sometimes, reminding him of the fragility of privilege and the importance of speaking up for those who didn't have a voice. Every time he considered staying silent, he remembered the countless messages he had received from people thanking him for shining a light on an issue they had long struggled to articulate. In the end, Marcus knew that the true measure of success wasn't headlines or hashtags, it was the lives touched along the way. Whether it was a teenager inspired to fight for justice, a store clerk learning to check their biases, or a shopper walking into a store feeling seen and valued, every small victory mattered. And as he looked toward the future, Marcus carried with him the lessons of the past. That courage could spark change, that accountability could lead to growth, and that even in the face of adversity, hope could prevail. The months following the incident became a period of reflection and growth for Marcus Thompson. He had spent countless hours thinking about what had happened, not just as an individual, but as someone who represented a larger movement toward fairness and equality. The experience had changed him in ways he hadn't anticipated. It wasn't just about proving his worth or holding Lisa accountable. It was about understanding the deeper layers of bias and discrimination that existed in society. And as he processed everything, Marcus realized that this moment wasn't just about him. It was about everyone who had ever felt unseen, unheard, or unfairly judged. One evening, after a long day of meetings and strategy sessions, Marcus sat down to write something personal, a letter to himself. It wasn't meant for anyone else's eyes, but as he began typing, the words flowed effortlessly. He wrote about how the incident had shaken him, not because of the humiliation or frustration, but because it reminded him of the countless others who didn't have the privilege of revealing their identity to escape prejudice. What if I hadn't been the CEO, he typed. What if I had been just another customer without a badge to show? Would anyone have believed me? These questions lingered in his mind, pushing him to think beyond his own experience. He decided to share some of these thoughts publicly during a television interview. Sitting across from the host, Marcus spoke candidly about the emotions he had wrestled with since that day at the store. It's easy to say, "This is wrong," and move on, he said. But the truth is, this kind of thing happens every single day to people who don't have titles or power or resources. They're treated unfairly and no one ever hears their stories. That's why we can't stop here. We have to keep fighting for them. His words resonated deeply with viewers, many of whom reached out to thank him for acknowledging the broader implications of his experience. Some shared stories of their own encounters with racism, while others expressed admiration for his willingness to use his platform for good. One message stood out in particular, a note from a young man named Jamal, who described being followed around stores his entire life simply because of the color of his skin. "Your story gave me hope," Jamal wrote. "I always thought I was alone, but now I know there are people like you out there who care." Reading that message brought tears to Marcus's eyes. It reminded him of why he had chosen to speak up in the first place, not for recognition, but to remind people that they weren't alone. He responded to Jamal personally, encouraging him to keep sharing his voice and promising to continue advocating for change. As time went on, Marcus noticed subtle shifts, not just within his company, but in the world around him. Conversations about racial profiling and discrimination became more frequent. both in private settings and public forums. Schools started incorporating discussions about bias into their curriculums, teaching children to recognize and challenge stereotypes early on. Community organizations partnered with businesses to host workshops and events focused on building bridges between different groups. Even politicians began proposing legislation aimed at addressing systemic inequities, citing examples like Marcus's story as evidence of the urgent need for reform. For Marcus, seeing these changes unfold was both inspiring and humbling. He knew that progress often came slowly, in small incremental steps rather than grand leaps. But each step mattered. Whether it was a child learning to see others differently, a manager rethinking their approach to customer service, or a shopper feeling safer walking into a store. Every action, no matter how small, contributed to a larger wave of transformation. To celebrate these efforts, Marcus launched an initiative called Voices for Change, inviting individuals from all walks of life to share their experiences with bias and discrimination. Submissions poured in from across the country, stories of resilience, courage, and determination to overcome adversity. Marcus compiled some of the most powerful narratives into a book titled Everyone Belongs Here, Stories of Hope and Healing, which quickly became a bestseller. Proceeds from the book went directly to funding scholarships and community programs designed to empower marginalized voices. Despite the positive momentum, Marcus remained acutely aware of the challenges still ahead. Racism and discrimination were deeply entrenched issues, woven into the fabric of society over centuries. Addressing them required more than goodwill or temporary fixes. It demanded sustained effort, difficult conversations, and uncomfortable truths. Marcus understood that he couldn't solve everything on his own, nor could any one person or organization. What mattered most was creating spaces where people felt safe enough to confront these issues together. To that end, Marcus expanded his focus beyond retail, partnering with leaders in industries like healthcare, education, and law enforcement to tackle bias in its many forms. He joined advisory boards, attended conferences, and participated in panel discussions, using his influence to amplify the voices of those working tirelessly behind the scenes. His goal wasn't to be the face of the movement, but to serve as a bridge, connecting people, ideas, and resources to drive meaningful change. On a personal level, the journey had transformed Marcus in profound ways. He had always considered himself a compassionate person, but the incident forced him to dig deeper, to examine his own biases and blind spots. He sought guidance from mentors and experts, immersing himself in books and documentaries about race, history, and social justice. These experiences helped him grow not only as a leader but as a human being. He also made a conscious effort to spend more time listening to others. Whether it was sitting down with employees, attending community meetings, or engaging with customers online, Marcus prioritized hearing diverse perspectives. He learned that empathy wasn't just about understanding someone else's pain, it was about taking action to alleviate it. And so he continued to push boundaries, challenging himself and those around him to do better. Looking back on everything that had transpired, Marcus felt a mix of emotions: pride, gratitude, and a lingering sense of responsibility. Pride because he had turned a painful experience into an opportunity for growth. Gratitude because so many people had supported him along the way. Responsibility because he knew the work was far from over. There would always be new challenges to face, new battles to fight, and new lessons to learn. In the final chapter of his book, Marcus reflected on this sentiment. Change isn't something you achieve once and then check off your list, he wrote. It's a lifelong commitment, a promise to yourself and to others that you'll never stop striving for a better, fairer, more inclusive world. Some days will feel like victories, and others will feel like setbacks. But as long as we keep moving forward, we're making progress. Those words captured the essence of Marcus's journey, a testament to the power of resilience, accountability, and hope. For Marcus, the true legacy of that fateful shopping trip wasn't the headlines or accolades. It was the countless lives touched by the ripple effect of standing up for what was right. And as he looked toward the future, Marcus carried with him the unwavering belief that even the smallest actions could spark monumental change.